Are those Ducks going to haunt the Buckeyes all season? Welcome into Ohio State Buckeyes Live here for the next hour. We've got three of the very best. Steve Hellwagon, Bucknuts 247 Sports at the top. Kevin Noon and Tony Gerdeman from Buckeye Scoop helping us break down Ohio State football with the Buckeyes coming off their first Big Ten Eastern Division showdown, a 33-24 win over Penn State. Guys, how we doing today?
Doing good.
Oh, look at those happy faces. Yes. Steve, let's start with you, because I would say roughly one half of the Ohio State contingent would say hard-fought win against a really good team, tough defense, maybe the best defense in the Big Ten. Sean Clifford playing the best Sean Clifford football we've seen, pretty much. Really good win, solid win, like it. Half of Ohio State Nation's like, what? What was that? We needed to cover. They're really not that good. What's wrong with us?
I think you're off on your percentages. I think it's more like 95% were in that second boat and only 5% are here living on planet Earth, knowing that Penn State was a top 5 team just 2 weeks ago. And although they didn't play very well in the second half against Iowa, and certainly the entire 4 quarters and 9 overtimes against Illinois, still a quality team. And Penn State really came out and took the fight to Ohio State. I thought they dominated the game for the first quarter and a half. And here for the previous 3 games, Ohio State had scored 19 straight possessions with C.J. Stroud at quarterback. The first 5 possessions netted a fumble, 3 punts, and a field goal. So they really struggled the first quarter and a half, I think. And really, they hit a long pass to Chris Olave midway through the second quarter for a touchdown, and then things kind of lessened up a little bit for Ohio State. They got a defensive touchdown after that, and all of a sudden they went from down 7-3 to up 17-7, almost in the blink of an eye. And you thought, well, everything's okay. But the officials gifted Penn State a field goal right before halftime, not calling a pair of blatant holding penalties on the blitzers, Eichenberg and Ransom, on back-to-back plays, leading to a field goal by Penn State right before halftime. And then Penn State drove for a touchdown, and now it's all tied up. But everything, all's well that ends well. The Buckeyes pulled away there in the latter part of the second half and were able to get away with the 33-24 win. They had to settle for 3 chip shot field goals, 4 field goals altogether. And if they're able to convert in the red zone a little better than they did, I think it was just 1 of 6 on touchdowns in the red zone for Ohio State, which is not very good, obviously, not for a team that's been, pushing the 50-point meter in each of its last 4 games. Had they been able to do that and get their own scoring up to 41 or 45 points, I think people would feel a little bit better about how that game all ended up. So at any rate, a win is a win, 9-point win over Penn State, a Penn State team that's probably going to end up around 8-4, 7-5 if they lose to both Michigan and Michigan State. What can we say? Tough year for them with the injuries and different things that have happened, but Ohio State lives to see another day.
I know fans were upset about the way Penn State was moving the ball. Ryan Day after the game seemed pretty okay with his defense. And when you look at the yards per play from that game for Penn State, they were at 4.86, which would be good for about 17th in the nation over the course of a season as a total defense. And Ohio State right now is number 16 in the nation in yards per play on defense, and they're giving up 4.84. So Penn State was right at what Ohio State is giving up. And if you hold a team to 4.86 yards per play, you're going to do very well. The problem is that they were at 1.11 for 16 on third downs. So Penn State could afford to get 4.8 yards per play, but because they just kept moving the chains and they were picking up their third downs, they were able to gain some ground and doing some of that, a lot of that through the air. And this kind of goes back to the secondary issues that have been around and maybe aren't quite fixed, but the RPO stuff, that's where, that takes advantage of everybody. That's really difficult to defend. They held Penn State to like 33 yards rushing, so they controlled the running game there. Not that Penn State can do anything, but the defensive line got after the quarterback. I think this is the best Sean Clifford has been this year. And I don't know that he was up 100%, but he was certainly much healthier than he was in any of his 2 previous games. And had he been this healthy against Iowa and Illinois, I think Penn State comes into that game undefeated.
Yeah, you mentioned the third down conversions. It ended up being 11 out of 18. I went through, and I think of the 11, 7 of them were with the pass, and the average to go was like 5.7 yards. So third and 5.7 on the 7 makes via pass. All of the runs, I think, were shorties. There certainly are some things that went well, some things that didn't go well. The most that I heard from talking to people was that it just looked like CJ Stroud kind of had that game 1, game 2 nervous energy, overthrow types of situations. But if you go back and you watch the tape, the offensive line just really didn't have a very good night. And I think the tackles played a little bit better than the interior line, but Brent Pry, really, the defensive coordinator for Penn State, did a great job of really changing the way that they went about doing things. And Ohio State really didn't have an answer and really just wasn't able to make enough adjustments. I mean, Trevion Henderson did run for a $161, 68 of that all on 1 carry. So you take that off of there with 27 yards for less than 100 yards, which is very un-Trevion Henderson-like. I think it was good, though. I think you never want to manufacture adversity, but this team certainly – as I'm trying to fix my mic here a little bit, as
You're good.
Okay, cool.
Sounds
As
good.
They had some things that they're going to work on. If it was all coming so easy, and then of course you have Nebraska and Purdue, but then you have the Michigan State and Michigan at the end. You want to make sure that you face some things. So I don't see it as the worst thing in the world unless you had a lot of money on Ohio State to cover, and then you probably don't share that outlook.
Yeah, 33-24 final. I think there was certainly a game plan that made a whole lot of sense on defense. Sean Clifford had to put the team on his back, and he did a pretty capable job. And the obvious on offense was the red zone situation and not converting down there, kicking field goals, which Ryan Day is very, very opposed to, as much as anybody outside of Lane Kiffin, actually. So he will kick them when it makes sense, unlike Lane Kiffin, who doesn't kick them even when it makes sense. So Buckeyes win at 33-24. All right, Tony, which brings us to this college football playoff ranking. The very first one unveiled, of course, on Tuesday. The Buckeyes stand at number 5, Oregon at 4. We won't run through the 1 through 9, but those are the ones that really matter at this point. And your thoughts about where the Buckeyes stand and what kind of clues were we given by the mysterious committee in week 1?
Well, I don't even know that you can call it a clue, but the evidence is that Cincinnati has no chance and they don't like Cincinnati, and nothing Cincinnati can do is going to get them into the playoffs. It's going to take everybody else losing games and maybe 2 games at that point. But I think Ohio State's in a great spot. Right now, all they have ahead of them, and coming into this, we were talking about how do you compare them, what happens with them in Oregon. And at this point, that doesn't matter because, they can both fit in this top 4 right now if things continue to go this way, because Michigan State, they will beat Michigan State. So Oregon moves up, Ohio State moves up. Then it's just a matter of, can Oklahoma catch anybody? And being on that conference call when Gary Barta was asked about Oklahoma, they have no good wins. But his voice went up a couple of octaves when talking about Caleb Williams and what this offense could be with Caleb Williams now. And so they're going to be, watching Oklahoma. And I went back, I think they were last year around 8 or 9 in the first rankings as well, Oklahoma was. And they've come from 15 before to make the playoffs. So the first rankings, you can come a long way. Ohio State came from 16 the year they won it. But I think with Ohio State being at 5, Cincinnati's out, and really I'll be interested to see what continues to happen when Ohio State has more quality wins than Oregon. Does Ohio State shoot above Oregon? And then at that point, I think Oregon has to watch their backs for Oklahoma.
Yeah, the thing everybody talks about, Oregon has beaten Ohio State head-to-head. Fact. That's a fact. We know that. That's not going away. Ohio State lost to a ranked Oregon team. Oregon lost to an unranked Stanford team. So the fact that Ohio State is just sitting one spot behind Oregon right now, I don't see that being a grand concern. The Pac-12 schedule is just not very good. Ohio State's going to still have games against current ranked number 3 and ranked number 7 with Michigan State and Michigan. Who knows if Purdue could sit there and fly in before Ohio State would play Purdue. I agree with Tony that Ohio State's sitting in a great spot. As long as Ohio State wins, and I don't even think it's a case of Ohio State needs to be winning games by 24, 28 plus points. I think as long as Ohio State wins, Ohio State's going to be fine. I really was not a big fan of seeing Alabama too, because once again, it just goes to the perception that it's the SEC Invitational. And I don't understand it. I mean, if you don't like certain teams because, you're undefeated, but that doesn't mean much. Cincinnati, UTSA, who's not even ranked, Wake Forest at 9. I understand that, but I'm not convinced Alabama's the number 2 team in the nation. And I know I saw Brad Powers put out some projected lines of on a neutral field, and Alabama was going to be about a 4-point favorite over Ohio State. UGA would be a 6-point favorite. Ohio State would be 11-14 on some of the teams around it on a neutral field. What are we judging Alabama on? Are we judging Alabama on the body of work to this point, the body of work including the end of the season, or is this a lifetime achievement award? Because if it's a lifetime achievement award, then Alabama should probably just be number 1 every week, and we should just learn to accept it. Hell, maybe you should just play the games in Tuscaloosa. I mean that just might make it easier for everybody at that point. So, I'm not as outraged as I may sound right now. I'm just a grumpy old man right now, but I'm not really a big fan of them being 2. I think it sends a really crummy message.
Well, I will pick it up from there because Alabama at 2, it is a lifetime achievement award. Are they the second best team in the country? They might be. I actually think they probably are the second best team in the country, but that doesn't mean you've got the second best resume, and they do not. The Florida win gets worse and worse by the week, and they needed a lot of help to get out of Gainesville alive, 31-29 on a failed extra point that led to a 2-point conversion that had to be attempted. They've played really one complete game against a really good team in Ole Miss. They did put the throttle down and really stopped Ole Miss. They took it to Mississippi State. They beat a collection of decent teams: Mississippi State, Florida, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Miami, if you want to throw them in the bucket as well. Decent teams, top 40 teams in the country. Ole Miss is at the high end of that, in the top 15. But maybe I'm a little slow, but I'm starting to realize that eyeball test doesn't necessarily mean what I thought it meant, meaning put the game in, let's watch the game and see how good this team looks. Eyeball test is basically brand name, talent, recruiting rankings, what we know about this, whether we trust this coaching staff, whether we trust this program, this team. That's really the eyeball test.
You can also look at the common opponents of Michigan State and Alabama being Miami, where Michigan State won on the road at Miami by about the same margin that Alabama beat Miami in Atlanta. And when that was brought up to the committee, Gary Barta on the teleconference last night, he didn't really want to go into it, just saying, it was a good win for both teams. But Alabama is Alabama, and they say they go into every week, not just every season, every week, just looking at what's happened on the field. And they don't look at any past seasons or anything like that, and they don't give any benefits of the doubt or whatever. And that's just, they've got Alabama there because they want Alabama there, and whether almost doesn't even matter what Alabama does anymore, as long as they only lose one game. And at this point, I'm not so sure that they can't get in with 2 losses based on already being 2 with 1 loss. It's just, This is their free spot. It's Alabama, and I don't even know that they could have lost by 14 or something to a 2-loss team, and they'd still be here. And then you just pump up Texas A&M and say it's not really a bad loss. We've got them at 14 or whatever, and it's like, well, you've put them there. You've made the loss better by pumping up Texas A&M as well. And this is again why we need to go to an expansion, because if this is how it's going to be every year, which it is, and not that Alabama hasn't earned it every year they've been in, but let's let them earn it, and they didn't.
Yeah, and before you guys chime in, real quick, Steve, just one more note on Alabama for me is that that's what annoys me is that, yes, do we all have our bias and preconceived notions about these teams and these programs? Of course we do, but I do my best to set it aside. I don't care if Wake Forest has gone 0-12 for the last 10 years. It's about 2021. What concerns me about this number 2 ranking is that Alabama's got LSU and Auburn. They're going to do nothing but substantiate this and confirm and further ingrain this number 2 ranking. Well, if they're number 2 when they play a consensus number 1 Georgia team and lose an SEC championship game by a field goal, well, drop them to 3 or 4 and they're still in it. 2 losses as the non-conference champion. I can certainly see that happening.
You're muted, Steve.
Sorry. It is set up pretty well for Alabama to get in. I don't know if they lose and go to 2 losses that they're going to still get in, though. I think that would be kind of far-fetched, particularly if like Oklahoma, Cincinnati both run the table, end up 13-0, Oregon 12-1, Ohio State 12-1. I think you got to consider those 4 teams ahead of Alabama, certainly with 2 losses. But, it is a difficult job, thankless job, because it is comparing apples to oranges, to pears, to grapes, to grapefruit. When you think about all the different paths all these different teams have taken. And one of the tweets I saw today that really resonated is they used to talk about how you need to pile up wins over Power 5 teams. And certainly Cincinnati can't do that. They can only play 2 of them a year if they're lucky. Most years they may only play 1. And on the same time, when I filled out my top 25 this week, and I've been a big backer of Houston, I've talked because I watched them play and just beat the crap out of somebody about 3 weeks ago with one of their league teams that I thought wasn't too bad. And they don't even have them in their top 25. And they've only got 1 loss. I'm kind of like, they're really, really bending over backwards to help some teams in some leagues and really, really bending over backwards to not help others. And so UTSA is another one, completely undefeated, not to be in their national top 25 is kind of interesting too. But or I guess did they lose a game? San Antonio, they may have lost a game.
No, they're undefeated.
No,
they're
a couple
undefeated.
of the other undefeateds, like SMU, like 2 of them lost last week, but not UTSA.
Yeah. So I think 18 playoff, this is a perfect year for that. I think I said this after Georgia, you could take the next 7 teams and put them in a hat and draw them out of a hat and put them in any order that you want. And you could make an argument for that order that you just picked out of a hat. Team A, Team B, Team C, without even knowing the names of the teams, having them blindly assigned to the board. I think you could make a case. The only one is Michigan State most certainly had to be ranked ahead of Michigan. And Oregon, with their loss to a bad bad Stanford team in their league, I think that was what gave everybody the cover weeks ago to put Ohio State over Oregon, because Ohio State wasn't losing to bad teams in their league. They were beating the bad teams in their league 60-20. So, or whatever those scores were, 54-7 over Indiana. Here's Michigan State ranked ahead of them, 20-15 over Indiana. Ohio State went out there on the same field and beat them 54-7. So, we can compare scores and different things like that. It's still early in the process, plenty of time to move up, but Ohio State is properly positioned. And to be honest, if Alabama loses, I think the door is wide open. If Ohio State beats Michigan State, the door is wide open there. They have to also beat Michigan. They have to win out, obviously. But the deliciousness of some of these matchups, what it could be. It could be an Ohio State-Oregon rematch in a semifinal game, and maybe Georgia in a rematch with Cincinnati from their bowl game last year is what it could turn out to be ultimately. But lot of football left to be played.
Or Kevin, real quick, Oklahoma and Notre Dame could somehow get in there and play each other, and then one of them will have to win a playoff game.
Gross.
That's a hell of an idea, Gerd. Let's do that.
I was just looking here. I have the rankings in front of me. From 13 to 18 is really your SEC section, except for BYU with Auburn 13, Texas A&M 14, Ole Miss 16, Mississippi State 17, Kentucky 18. I understand that the Big Ten.
Let's prop up the SEC.
I know. The Big Ten has
many years ago in the NCAA. Let's put them all in the East.
The Big Ten has 6 in there. The SEC has 7, but the SEC also has everybody pretty much from 18 up. So it certainly does feel like that the committee has announced here in week 1 that that they are protecting the SEC product by having everybody there, because even when the cannibalization happens, I mean, obviously number 16 Ole Miss and number 17 Mississippi State will play each other in the Egg Bowl around Thanksgiving. These teams will start to knock each other off. But even with that, you lose a game. Well, how can we drop the loser of the Egg Bowl from 16 or 17 out of the rankings? We may as well put them at 24 or 25. And it reminds me of a year where they really seemed to want to make sure that they kept Alabama front and center, and they inserted a non-conference opponent in at 25 on one of the last rankings, and it was obviously it was totally a screw job at that point, because that team didn't deserve to be there at that point. There were so many other Power 5 teams that were well above them in terms of prestige and body of work. I mean, it was a real joke. I can't even remember who it was. I mean, and I think it was a P5 team, but it wasn't a great one.
I think it was a group of 5 team.
I can't even remember.
I think it was the 2017 year when they had to stretch to get him to the 4 spot. Let's see here. I think that was the year. I think it was Fresno State who was 10-4. I think it was Fresno State in 2017 that they snuck into the top 25 at the end.
Well, there's a lot of teams you're going to have to keep track of that have been used to help prop up Alabama in the SEC. So probably somebody from every year. In fact, to get back real quick to the Texas San Antonio, they were brought up on the conference call, and Gary Barta said, well, their best win is Illinois. And it's like, well, yes, that's true. And it's not a great win. But they also beat Memphis. Memphis beat Mississippi State. And yet Mississippi State is number 17. Same Mississippi State is in this ranking. They're ranked this high because of their win over Texas A&M and their win over Kentucky, 2 teams that are overrated by the committee. It's just a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's all used to justify whatever they want. And it's gotten to the point where it's for me, it's time to have conference champions get automatic bids and then go from there. And I know people will say, but you could have a 9-3 team or 10-3 team. I don't care. That's fine.
I don't care either.
And well, it lessens the season. I disagree with that. It makes the season more impactful for everybody.
Absolutely.
It makes more games more important. And if you win your conference and you're 9-3 or whatever, that doesn't mean you're going to win it all, but at least you've gotten into the mix. And it's clear that the group of 5, good luck ever getting into the mix the way it is right now. And I don't know that it's necessarily Cincinnati's fault as much as it is Indiana's fault this time for failing the Bearcats. I do think when you're a group of 5 team, if you want to complain, if you want to get into it, you've got to you can't play Murray State or whatever in the non-conference. You've got to play 3 Power 5 teams. And then you still have only played a third of the Power 5 teams as everybody else. So even then, you're not going to have a great argument for making the playoffs as they stand now.
I don't think their league's any worse than the Pac-12 though. So I mean, they don't play a lot head to head. So
Well, and you can look at the ACC as well. Like Cincinnati's got more ranked opponents ahead of them than Wake Forest does. And so, yeah, you're right. Giving these other programs, these other conferences too much credit. And, we're probably all guilty of stuff we're accusing others of as well when it comes to the AAC and the Pac-12 and the ACC as well. And just more reason to have automatic qualifiers and I guess an expanded playoff.
Yeah, but Wake and Oregon, at least, I mean, maybe not as much Oregon as of late, but at least Wake has been impressive in its wins. Cincinnati has not been very impressive in its wins against teams with 1 or 2 wins this season. I mean, the Navy game comes to mind. It certainly is not, Cincinnati has to be doing it better and cleaner than everybody else, and Cincinnati is not doing that. And I mean, we can go back, did you win the game? Okay, they won the game, but it's, you're not doing anything to impress the hearts and minds of the 13 men and women down there in the room in Grapevine, Texas.
Yeah, I'll go back 30 years to the UNLV basketball days. They played in the Big West, and it wasn't a good conference, but they were clearly the best team because they beat everybody by 30 or 40 points, and you knew from watching them. And Cincinnati's not doing that. And Luke Fickell said himself this week that before the game, so last week, that they've probably succumbed to that kind of pressure and trying to live up to those expectations. And it's not easy.
I have one other note to make, and then we'll get to some of these questions in the live chat. Somebody explained to me, I thought I had a pretty good grasp of strength of schedule until I saw yesterday that Oregon had the 22nd ranked schedule in the country. And this is currently. They're talking about current because they were looking at Wake and Cincinnati at 98th and I think 102, and Wake's is going to jump immensely with its next 4 games and on into an ACC championship game if they would get there, versus Cincinnati's going to probably stagnate around 100. But listen to this. This is the 22nd ranked schedule in the country. How is this? Okay, Ohio State, obviously. Other than that, second best game, Fresno State. Okay, they're 22 or 23 in the committee's rankings, which that can certainly be debated. They lost to Hawaii. They're 7-2. So Fresno State. We got Ohio State. Stony Brook, Arizona, one of the worst teams in the country. Stanford, well documented, 3-5, 3-6, whatever they are. That's their loss. Cal, I don't know what they are currently. They were 1-5 a couple of weeks ago. I think they picked up another win. They're 2-6, 3-5 in that range. UCLA, that might arguably be their second win. They've been dragged down to 5-4, not losing to good teams. Colorado is one of the worst teams in the country. That's the 22nd ranked schedule.
It's crazy. I don't know.
It's awful.
Maybe they get extra points for playing Ohio State on the road with that formula. I don't know, but yeah, you're right. It doesn't look good on paper. I mean, only 1 or 2, 2 or 3 ranked or 2 or 3 teams with winning records. I mean, that's pretty bad. Ohio State's is probably middle of the pack. I don't know. I mean, on one hand, you get credit for playing Oregon. On the other hand, you lost to them. So, how do you rate that? But I don't know.
Do you guys remember where Ohio State, they were like 30, 35 spots behind Oregon. They were around 54, 56, somewhere in that range. They showed the schedule comparison. Yeah, and Ohio State's got Oregon. So basically, how do you equate them against each other? Because they played, I would say it's roughly the same game to a certain extent. Minnesota's, they're in the committee's top 20. Maryland's got a winning record at 5-3. I know it's not a great schedule. It's going to improve. Penn State. So that's not a better schedule than Oregon's.
Maryland's going to win a couple for them, and Rutgers, did win one over Illinois, but the gains on the schedule for Ohio State are going to be few and far between. Akron, but they fumbled the ball in the end zone going in for a touchdown last night. Ryan Day probably threw a glass through his flat screen, seeing the end of that game. But you know, I don't know who were they playing Buffalo maybe last night. It all runs together, but that was a action that went against them, I think, last night. And that's, as Kevin says, that's a reason why Akron can't have nice things. So
I'll take Minnesota, Penn State, and Maryland over
Cal, Stanford,
Fresno State, UCLA, and Cal, I guess.
How
is that a 30?
UCLA beat that juggernaut LSU to start the season.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, it's
that's what did it right there.
Juggernaut.
All right, let's see what
Oregon is the only Pac-12 team that is 3 games over 500 or better.
Yeah,
and they've got a couple that are 2 games over and some that are 1 game over. So maybe it's just you play enough 4-4 teams, and the committee or the schedule, that formula, whatever, really likes it. And I don't strength of schedule is a funny stat, and it's not always funny.
Our guy Byers is back at it. He really wants to pin me down on this. So now, Tony, you're going to be challenged here to take this one up. Tony and Tom said you need to have a Heisman candidate caliber quarterback to be QB1 at Ohio State. Mark says you only need a top 15 quarterback. Which is it? And then, of course, I'm being taken out of context. I could explain later. But, Tony, your take.
Well, I don't know that we've ever said that you need to have a Heisman caliber candidate quarterback. It's just that when you are the starting quarterback at Ohio State and you play in Ryan Day's offense, that equates to being a Heisman candidate. Like it's the chicken comes before the egg here. Like you don't. It's not a requirement at Ohio State, but it's a byproduct. It's what they want from it. And so, I don't think I think it's the offense that creates the Heisman candidate. And granted, and I don't even think you need a guy who can be a Heisman candidate. I think you need, more important than that, you need a quarterback that can beat the top defenses in the nation. Justin Fields was that. Dwayne Haskins maybe was that. JT Barrett wasn't that. And JT Barrett would have been a Heisman finalist his freshman year, his redshirt freshman year in 2014, had he not gotten injured. And so I don't, the Heisman thing is, we all talk sports, so I don't want to say it's a complete farce. It's not important. It's a complete farce. But, if you're a top 5, top 10 team in a national title hunt, you have a quarterback that throws for a bunch of yards, then you are going to be in the Heisman picture. That's just how college football is now. I would think that any Heisman voter who hasn't voted for a defensive player at least twice in the last 10 years should have their votes revoked. They should not be allowed to vote. There's more than just
Chase Young. Does that count?
Exactly. So, and a lot of people should have.
Can I keep my vote?
You can keep your vote, Steve. But
Okay.
I think there's some straw man stuff going on with this argument, and it's not the candidate. It's the quarterback putting up the stats that creates the candidate.
Well stated. I don't know where I have to take this discussion that's been going on for months with Byers here. I basically stated that it was a ridiculous expectation to say that C.J. Stroud or any first-year Ohio State quarterback who had never thrown a pass, whoever would have won that job, to be a quote-unquote Heisman candidate, which I guess translates to you're one of the top 2 or 3 quarterbacks in the country right out of the gate against Minnesota. Boom, hit the ground running. You're one of the 2 or 3 best quarterbacks. You're Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields. Right now, that was an unreal expectation, that was unrealistic. That was my point. And that Ohio State could put a top 15 quarterback out on the field and win the Big Ten and go to the playoff. That was basically my statement.
And Ohio State has done that before. They've done it with JT Barrett. They've made the playoffs with JT Barrett starting as the quarterback, and he was a top 15 quarterback, but he didn't have the ability to even score against Clemson in 2016.
Was Craig Krenzel a Heisman candidate?
He was not. Kevin. He was not. But that
Sadly,
was
he's not.
you know,
He played like a champion. He took some hits like I haven't seen since the old 15-round boxing days. But and I know the game's very different now than it was back in 2000 Dickety 2. I mean, it's very, but I think that I think it's somewhere in the middle. I don't think you have to be a top 2 or 3. I don't know if top 15, that might be a little too wide of a range, but I'm not here to pile on Mark. It's his show after all. But I think you need to be at least a top 7 or 8 national type of guy for your team to really, outside of catching lightning in a bottle.
But again, I was marrying that top 15 quarterback with Ohio State talent against the Big Ten. That was my only claim. They can win the Big Ten, go to the playoff with a top 15 quarterback. Buyers, we'll give you Eric Crouch. You want him as a Heisman winner. He can run your offense, and you can win, 6 games. There you go.
that's cool. That's quite an extrapolation. You're just saying you can win the Big Ten and go to the playoffs, and then somebody else equating that to winning it all. Ohio State could win the Big Ten with Chris Chugunov playing quarterback.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean he's going to beat Alabama or Georgia.
Yeah, labels like all this really don't matter. It's all about just winning football games. And I get what the question is about is, do you have to have one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the country to win the Big Ten and qualify for the playoff? It certainly helps. Let's just say that, but it's not necessarily required. My goodness. I mean, if you want to win it all, you better be awesome at the quarterback position. That's what I've seen, from Joe Burrow. The kid from Alabama last year was amazing. Ohio State had great quarterback play the year that they won it. From Barrett and Jones both, even though people thought Barrett was just a caretaker. And go back and look at his stats. I mean, I think he put up like 40 some touchdowns or something, 30 passing and 11, 12. Yeah, some outrageous. He set a record, I think. So I don't know. Again, labels and Heisman candidate and everything. It's all, in the eye of the beholder. I mean, what is our Heisman race this year? Do we even know right now what that looks like? Is it the kid from Ole Miss, the quarterback, Corral, or however you pronounce that? Or is it the running back, Walker from Michigan State, who just had in one of the season's biggest games a career day and set a record for touchdowns rushing against Michigan? I don't know. I mean, I think that's still TBD. Based on how the top teams finish out the rest of the way, I think we don't know yet.
Walker would be my guy based on what I've seen so far.
But he doesn't play quarterback.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, he's disqualified.
Running backs can win it.
As I was doing research on Nebraska, Ohio State's next opponent, I was shocked to see how little Kenneth Walker did in that game. I think he was held like 70 yards. I mean, it was, or maybe even less. I think the team was held to 7. It was not a strong outing from Kenneth Walker. I really like what he did in those couple of big games, but are we kind of doing the same Caleb Williams thing there at this point of, oh wow, they're pretty good now or whatever? And I don't know. I'm not moved yet on Walker. I mean, he's certainly on the short list, but I don't know if he has done enough over the course of the entire season. Now, if he puts up 2 bills against Ohio State, all right, I get it. But let me see more than just one data point being the game against Michigan.
Yeah, Nebraska 19 for 61, 19 carries, 61 yards. So certainly not his best outing. Youngstown State held him to 57. Of course, that was 7 carries, but.
All right. You guys figure Ohio State wins this one Saturday by about 50? Is that what we've got? That's pretty much the consensus. Oh, we got Greg Peterson on the line from Husker Online. Greg, how you doing?
I say 48.
48. Okay, 48. No,
Greg, you're not the photographer that did his own selfie out in the middle of the field after they gave away that one game a few weeks ago, are you? Where he
Well, I look that old. Come on, Mark. That guy had a big old gray beard going on, and I've never seen that guy in my life. I think he lives in Minnesota.
okay, all right,
He's not even. He doesn't do Nebraska games in Lincoln. That's for sure.
wow.
everybody, it's Greg Peterson, Husker Online, joins me every Tuesday night. Well, we're kind of floating it at this point because of the playoff announcement. But anyway, every week on our Nebraska channel, we got Greg and myself chopping it up on Nebraska football. I guess, Greg, if Nebraska loses this game to Ohio State by 1 score, I'm going to make up some kind of conspiracy theory. I don't know what it's going to be, but this is just uncanny what this team does every week.
Well, if they do, they're going to be scrambling at the end of the game to make it a 1-score game when there's the clock's running out. In my opinion. So, yeah, we'll see. But historically, against Ohio State, doesn't usually end up that way.
Well, after what we saw this past week with Ohio State against Penn State, I wouldn't put anything past the Big Ten officials. They're just corrupt enough to keep Nebraska in every game, but not corrupt enough to let them win any of them. So I don't know.
All right. So we got Greg for the next 15 minutes or so. You guys can fire away on what's wrong with the Huskers or what's right. We just mentioned right before you jumped on talking about Heisman Trophy candidates that Nebraska, one of the few that held down Kenneth Walker at Michigan State, 19 carries for 61 yards. So you got some black shirts over there.
Well, that's the one bright spot on the team is it is a defense that's playing at a high level. Maybe doesn't have the statistics that you're looking for. They're not one of the top teams in the Big Ten statistically, but, they play a tough-nosed defense, and they keep this team in games. And if the offense wasn't putting them in horrible positions, you'd have a lot better statistics. So, yeah, the black shirts, they're not intimidated by Ohio State. They're looking at it as a challenge. The question is if the offense can, hold up their end of the bargain. That's been the struggle all year for Nebraska. And defensively, Ohio State's going to get what they're going to get. Everybody knows that. But if the Nebraska defense can play well enough to keep them in the game, and you never know what happens. It's been a wacky year so far. Anything can happen on Saturdays in the Big Ten so far.
It's been almost a year since Nebraska lost a game by more than 1 score. And you just see the way they do it not every week, obviously, but the way they lose games. And you just wait for Adrian Martinez to do something that he shouldn't. And it looks to me when I'm watching that Adrian Martinez is also waiting for him to do something he shouldn't. And is the situation with Logan Smothers behind him, are they so far distanced that there's no push there?
Yeah, they are. Unfortunately, Husker fans won't like me saying that. Everybody's clamoring to give Logan Smothers a shot. But they're not the same quarterback. Mark and I talked about this on Monday, that you really want to give Logan Smothers his first ever start against Ohio State. That just doesn't add up to anything good going to be happening for Nebraska. Obviously Adrian Martinez has had 2 bad games in a row after he's been playing at a pretty high level the rest of the season. So, Logan Smothers just, he doesn't have any experience, and he's a talented kid, but he's kind of he's a better runner than he is a passer at this point of his career. Not to say that he's a bad passing quarterback, but he just doesn't have all the throws in his repertoire that Adrian Martinez does. If you had Logan Smothers in there, I think you'd see just a heavy dose of run the ball. It would really limit Nebraska's offensive attack if you're starting a Logan Smothers against Ohio State on Saturday.
The Ohio State had a quarterback about 20 years ago, Steve Belisario, who was referred to by some in the program kind of as a coach killer, because he was really good in practice, and he could do some things, and would, he was better than the other guys and was capable of so much, but then he would find ways to make mistakes in the games. And it just feels like as long as Scott Frost is tied, like he is completely tied to Adrian Martinez right now. And can he withstand that this year and be back next year?
Well, that's a really interesting question that's been talked about quite a bit. And the way things are going right now, up until the last couple of games, Adrian Martinez might have been coming back for a sixth year, actually, in my mind, and the way he was talking and stuff. But the way things have happened since then, and the way the fan base is very frustrated, I think it would be a huge ask to bring back both Scott Frost and Adrian Martinez next year. Scott Frost probably coming back next year just because, bottom line, it's a money situation. You're building a brand new facility right now with construction going on daily during practice. And, economically, it just doesn't make any sense to get rid of Scott Frost this year. But, bringing both of them back, I don't think this fan base will stand for it. And why, at this point, if you're Adrian Martinez, why do you want to come back here? Seriously, it's been a train wreck. I mean, he's had some moments, but nothing has fallen the way that everybody kind of expected it to fall after his freshman year.
Yeah, looking at Martinez through the years against Ohio State, he averages 15, 16 carries a game, somewhere in the 80-yard mark. I mean, mobile quarterbacks are always a challenge, but I look at somebody who does a good job of running against Ohio State. I look at Nebraska's numbers. Let me pull it here. Like in the last 3 games, they haven't broken the 140-yard mark running the ball. I mean, how much of the rushing attack will be Adrian Martinez, and how much of the rushing attack should be Adrian Martinez this week?
Well, if you go back, Kevin, to last week, Nebraska had 115 yards in the first half. Jacquez Yant had 2 long runs of 33 yards and 18 yards. And Nebraska came out with a 17-14 lead against Purdue into the second half and went 3 and out, and then abandoned the running game. Just completely abandoned it. And just started trying to play fast, and then started making a bunch of mistakes. So ideally, you want Adrian Martinez to run, a good 7 or 8 designed runs. And then, you're going to see another, 6 or 7 option plays. And then if he's going to be and that's as much as you really want him running the ball right there. Anything else on that is going to be scrambling around because, things have fallen apart, and he's just running around to save his life. And, because there was a holding penalty on first down, and now it's, 1st and 20. And trying to make something happen when there's nothing there. Last week as well, he had one of those scramble plays that he could have had a first down on, and kind of gave himself up. I know Coach Frost was not happy with that, called him out on the sideline after that play, and really thought that he just wasn't given that effort that he should have. So, ideally you don't want him having to run the ball more than he has to, because quite frankly, you have 2 capable running backs that are very capable of sharing the load, kind of a thunder and lightning package with Ramir Johnson and Jacquez Yant right now. And if Nebraska would just dedicate themselves to running the ball and limit Ohio State's touches on offense, I think that they can stay in the game for 3 quarters or so. So that's kind of ideally what you want. You just don't want him running too much.
Right.
I guess I would ask, how's the fan base taking this? They've been through so much. You call it 20 years, 10 years, 5 years, this year. It's been a long road through the desert, for Nebraska fans here. No league championships. not even in contention here the last several years. No bowl games. Again, no bowl game this year. Just I don't know how are people dealing with this, and it's like Lucy and Charlie Brown in the football. It's right there to be kicked, and then it's no longer there. It gets pulled away in the fourth quarter. At the end of the fourth quarter, every game it gets pulled away. I don't know how do they still flock to this stadium to support this team and get nothing out of it? I don't know. I give them credit. They're the most resilient group of people on the face of the planet, kind of like Browns fans, I guess. I don't know, but or Detroit Lions fans, or, I don't even know, but, Kansas
bad
City
company
Royals
to keep.
fans before they won the World Series. How are they responding to this?
Yeah, Mark, it's Steve, it's really weird that you can still have a team, against Purdue last week, a 3-5 team, and you still had 86,000 people strong in that stadium, back in a team that, quite frankly, is going nowhere. It's a spooky feeling. I think that, this goes back almost 20 years. I mean, when I first met Kevin and when I moved to Nashville, right after the Frank Solich administration, there's really been not a lot to hang your hat on as a Husker fan. And it's starting to finally get to that point where I don't think people really want to go and watch a bad product anymore. Not to say it's a bad product right now. The last 2 weeks have kind of stunk, but the way they've played top teams all year, you saw a lot of improvement. You saw that moving forward, little baby steps moving forward, but then you take a giant step back. And I've heard a lot more rumblings around than I ever have now. And a lot of the support, Scott Frost has taken a lot of heat, but he's also had a lot of support. And at this point, they have the home sellout streak that they hang their hat on, are so proud of, that is in desperate jeopardy to go away here at any time, really. They had to, the first couple of games of the year, they had to actually, some boosters had to step up and buy big blocks of tickets to give away just to keep that sellout streak alive. So, yeah, it's slowly crumbling, and it's sad because it's, it's your chosen boy to run the program, much like Jim Harbaugh at Michigan. And, with a brand new AD and Trev Alberts, who's a no-nonsense guy and knows a little bit about college football and knows a little bit about Nebraska. I would hate to be in his shoes right now because, first 3 months on the job and, he's dealing with, the number one question he's asked us every day is Scott Frost going to be the coach here next year? So, yeah, the fan base is almost at the edge right now, really. And I would never have ever said that in the past because you see, this fan base continually back this team year in and year out, just like they were winning championships, by the boatload in the 90s. So, yeah, it's a very strange atmosphere. And Steve, also, for the last couple of years, those goosebumps don't even come to me anymore. Like, before kickoff, when Nebraska does the tunnel walk, you'd always get those goosebumps. They've been gone for the last couple of years, and then they kind of returned here this year. All of a sudden, boom, they returned, and now they're gone again. So that's kind of the roller coaster ride, I think, in a nutshell for Nebraska fans.
We talk Ohio State football here every week with Steve Hellwagon from Bucknuts 247 Sports, Kevin Noon, Buckeye Scoop, Tony Gerdeman, Buckeye Scoop. We appreciate Greg being here. Greg Peterson from Husker Online. If you guys have just 1 or 2 more minutes, just my question, Greg, is basically there is such incredible tradition, brand name, resources, facilities, expectations, all of that speaks to blue blood elite program, but in a recruiting footprint that makes it difficult to keep up with those expectations. So where should the expectations be, and how much can any coach come in there? Let's say Frost is gone next year or the year after, even if they get a pretty first-rate coach to go in there, just the expectation or the realistic expectation to be able to bring in the kind of talent to win Big Ten championships.
Well, bottom line, you still have a huge tradition here. You have an unbelievable brand new facility being built that is just mind-boggling when you look at the blueprints, and I see the progression on that on a daily basis. And when recruits come in here and they see what's going on around here, that's the key. And I don't care who your coach is. Coaches have been in here. I mean, Bill Callahan came in here and recruited like a king. I mean, it's not that hard to do with the backing you have, the academic. That's one way to win the kids' parents is just the academic advantages that you get here with the support that you get here as a student athlete. And it is all about Nebraska football here, and it makes the recruits feel pretty special. And you know what? It just takes a few wins to get it rolling again. So, I mean, as long as you can come in here, I don't care what your name is as a head coach, as long as you can sell a program to the kids and make them believe in what you're telling them, you can recruit. You can recruit just as good as you need to win games here.
Greg, we appreciate you stopping by, doing a little extra work for the Voice of College Football this week.
Hey, my pleasure always.
Awesome. Great to see you. And we're going to sign off here in a few seconds, so you can certainly hang on if you'd like to, or jump on out and enjoy the rest of your day off, right?
Yeah.
Day off on Wednesday?
Love Wednesdays. Yep.
Nice. Nice.
Yep. Get back to the grind on Thursday. So, yep.
Buckeye fans, we got three of the very best here covering Ohio State football, so we want to be able to track them. So anybody watching us right now, which is going to be several thousand once we get it out there on the quote-unquote rewatch squad, but everybody live here, we want to be able to give some appreciation to these three. So, Steve, we'll start with you. Where can we find you?
Bucknuts, bucknuts.com, Twitter at Steve Hellwagon. And again, looking forward to going out to Nebraska, one of my favorite places to go and cover a game. And they really do treat football very special out there, and love their team and love their university. And there's not a whole heck of a lot to do out there, kind of like Iowa, but it is still a very great place to go watch a game, and looking forward to it this week. And then the stretch continues, some tough opponents coming up for the Buckeyes.
Kevin, what do you got going on this week?
Yeah, my usual routine. Tail of the Tape will come up tomorrow. Behind Enemy Lines will come out on Friday. Probably once I jump off of the live show, I'll write my prediction for the game. But you can find me at BuckeyeScoop.com, and you can find me on Twitter at Kevin_Noon. And, of course, you can find my weekly show, The Big Me Kickoff, on YouTube.
And you can find me at Buckeye Scoop as well. You can find my podcast on all of your podcast platforms. It's the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. We've gone daily since the season started. But I just dropped a new show today of bold predictions for the game. Me and Tom Moore are kind of a competitive bold prediction thing going on. And so look for that. And I don't know that I have anything planned today, but I'll have to come up with something.
Tony will also let us know on a regular basis there. Keep us updated on exactly what level of quarterback Ohio State needs to win a national championship, whether they need a top 3 or is it a top 5. Maybe it's a top 7. Maybe if they have a number 6, they're only going to win a playoff game. I don't know, because Byers is chiming in. And Tony, your talents extend far beyond your writing skills and your analysis skills. Should be on Dancing with the Stars, because you tap danced around that question like a professional. We all know it's championship or bust.
Well, I do think Ohio State has a championship quarterback. I think CJ Stroud can beat the defenses that they will face this year, including Georgia. Will they? I don't know. I think he is capable of that, and that's what they need. And if that means he's a Heisman candidate, I mean, he was a Heisman candidate before the season because he was the Ohio State starting quarterback, not because of anything he did on the field. So I don't even know what we're arguing anymore, but thank you for the super chat.
Yes. Vier, thank you so much for the super chat. Yakov, you as well. Thank you for the super chat and for chiming in today. Steve, Kevin, Tony, appreciate it. Enjoy the game this weekend, and we will see you back here next week, everyone.